My encouragement to the seasoned network engineer crew is to start experimenting. Again, we've all said be careful with your data, but start experimenting. Do things like Google adjacent or Google replacement. Think of things like I wanted to analyze some packet captures. Again, not anything that would be sensitive. Debug output, not anything that would be sensitive. Think tools, network modeling tools like Cisco Modeling Labs is a great way to build up a network of like kind of artificial data, but that it looks like real data.
Welcome to part 2 of this episode of the Cisco Learning Network podcast. That again was Joe Clark, distinguished engineer at Cisco, giving his advice to how seasoned professionals in networking can start implementing AI in their networking roles. If you missed part 1, we encourage you to go back and listen. It sets the stage with important discussions around what AI is, how it's being defined in the networking space, and some of the first use cases we're seeing in the field. In this second half, the conversation shifts into the bigger questions. How can organizations build trust in AI systems? What does responsible use look like? And how are certifications and learning paths at Cisco evolving to prepare the next generation of network engineers? In addition to Joe, Cisco Learning Network Community Manager Matt Saunders, Distinguished Architect Hank Preston, and Principal Engineer Kareem Iskander share their insights on where AI is headed, what skills professionals should be developing, and how Cisco is making sure its certifications stay relevant in an era defined by rapid technological change.
As the leader of our technical advocacy team, I know that you have a couple of security and cybersecurity minded folks on your team, and you work with them on that front in presentations and topics and sessions and whatnot. And so let's talk just a bit about security. This is a big area, so we can spend another hour-long podcast on just this topic. But oftentimes, cybersecurity, well, basically, my understanding is always cybersecurity starts with the human aspect of things. And as folks are starting to look at leveraging AI models, AI tools, and Hank, you kind of mentioned this a little bit as well, of not exposing data externally to large models, that are hosted in the cloud externally. What are some of the ways that organizations, IT departments should be looking at the usage of AI tools from an information security standpoint as well? What are some of the recommendations that you have? Like, okay, if you're going to use this, you need to do these 3 things to protect your data and keep the integrity of your systems secure.
I think a big part of having secure AI and being responsible with AI is education. And I think educating in a big enterprise, you have to educate your employees to how does the AI behind the scenes work. If you get something like ChatGPT desktop or Claude desktop and you start pushing files in that you get that are highly confidential to that model, what happens after? I'm not sure it's intuitive enough to folks are just thinking of it, out of the box thinking, okay, when I give it this information, when I give it this data, it's learning from it. And if I'm pushing that from here on my system, maybe the next iteration of this model could show up for Hank when he's asking something very similar question. And it exposes internal data. The human factor is a huge security risk that we have to educate folks around. You have to understand what happens with the data that you share. And that's all about responsible AI. There's also a couple of layers of security once we open up things like MCP and ragging and all of that, especially with even with prompt engineering. I think there was a recent release of a tutorial that Kyle Winters on the technical advocacy team showcased how you could manipulate the LLM by injecting certain prompts and how to mitigate that.
The free Cisco U tutorial Kareem is referring to, created by Kyle Winters from Cisco's technical advocacy team, walks you through how prompt injection attacks work and, most importantly, how to defend against them. It's a practical look at how a malicious or even unintentional prompt can manipulate an LLM into exposing sensitive information or even taking unsafe actions, and the strategies you can use to mitigate those risks. If you'd like to dive deeper into that, you'll find the link to the full tutorial in the description of this episode.
That's one of the tutorials that we have on there. It's really, really interesting from an AI perspective. Cisco has AI defense. I think that's something that's released. We talk about the importance of having that, but also and I'm covering multi layers here. Also, when we would drill down a little bit at the protocol level from an MCP perspective, everybody's building MCPs. And we talk about this all the time. The easy part is building those MCP servers. The hard part is governance of the MCP servers. And I think I was reading an article about the security of MCP. The protocol itself is super secure, but if you're opening up things and you're coding and you are not being secure or smart about the tools that you're exposing, that's a huge security factor to your organization. So there are multiple layers of security here, but I think it starts with the education and the human factor in that play.
Yeah, I think that's a great baseline to start from personally is the human factor, the education, like you mentioned. And this helps to support the education, I would say, but policy defining as a part of that education, like written, documented policies about what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, when and where. And then, yeah, education, user training, basically. Joe, would you like to click into that any further at all? I don't think necessarily we'll try to get into the full range of AI-based security offerings to that level, but how organizations and IT departments should be protecting data with this AI paradigm involved there. Any expansion, any double clicking you'd like to get into there?
I'll reinforce what you and Kareem were saying about education. Cisco internally, we didn't jump on the AI bandwagon. In fact, we pumped the brakes quite a bit with employees because initially when ChatGPT 3 and then 4 came out, there was a lot of excitement in the industry. And of course, Cisco employs people, so they were like, "Ooh, this looks interesting. We can play with this." And then things proliferated with diffusion models, image generators, slide generators. And people were getting, "Oh, I want to do this." And I was at one of our distinguished engineer meetings and we got a presentation and the first slide had a picture of Chuck Robbins riding a dinosaur. And they said, "Well, it looks like him. It looks like he's on a dinosaur, but he never actually posed for that picture. Dinosaurs don't live anymore despite Jurassic Park." And humor aside, it delved into at the time, go back to that picture. Who owns that picture? Where did it come from? It didn't magically appear. Matter isn't just magically created. There were other dinosaur pictures in the training set. There were pictures of Chuck Robbins. Who has the intellectual property rights? So that was something Cisco was concerned about. If we're going to start using AI models to generate text, to generate images, to generate slides, who are we going to attribute that to? Code, who are we going to attribute that to? Then, of course, Hank mentioned data and data privacy. That was always a big concern. So we pumped the brakes. We said, we need time to analyze this and decide what we as an organization want to do. And we started to discuss and partner with companies like Microsoft and OpenAI and come up with private instances of these models so that we could have some control over our data. And we were assured that our data wouldn't be used to train their models outside of our containment area. And yes, maybe our employees couldn't immediately take advantage of all the stuff that was coming out. But by playing it safe, we protect ourselves, our employees, we protect our customers, our partners, and that's really what it's about. To have that user education, don't just go and do this because you don't necessarily understand all the ramifications. Let our security researchers, our Talos team, let us do our AI defenses, Kareem, let us do the due diligence and figure out what the risks are here so we can bring you the more approved tools, the safer tools, so you can feel more confident. It's not meaning that hallucinations go away, but at least you can feel more confident that the data you're putting into here isn't going to be used against you or our customers or partners. And there's at least some sanity check at the data coming out. Obviously, the human still needs to put a little critical thought behind that too. But that education and that willingness to be responsible, to put responsibility before all the coolness, will help you in the long run. It'll mean in the long run, you'll be able to execute better with less risk because you've analyzed this. You've put a lot of expert and experienced thought behind it before you just start running in different areas, running in different directions.
One thing I want to comment on is Joe's right. Cisco definitely initially said, hey, hold for a second. However, that didn't last long. I've been very impressed with how quickly the Cisco IT folks have kind of dove in and recognized that this is a powerful tool for the Cisco employee base and engineers and kind of across the organization. And we've done a phenomenal job, particularly when I compare to what I've seen and talking with other organizations and people that work at different companies, is once they got their hands around what was possible and the comfort in being able to do those private instances of our models through Microsoft and some other areas, man, they opened up the world for our team to go after. And I will say, I'll be honest, right? I am far more comfortable using the AI tools that I know that the Cisco IT and the responsible AI team here at Cisco have looked at. Because, okay, if the Cisco team has looked at this and said, okay, these are safe, these are valid, we can go ahead and use for those. It's not that I don't think about security anymore. It means that I don't have to do quite as level of a depth of kind of consideration about what's appropriate as if I work within those. And that has been phenomenal to allow me to feel more comfortable kind of diving in and seeing what's going to happen with these tools. And I think every organization needs to do this to some extent, is to say we need to evaluate what's appropriate for our company. How do we keep ourselves safe? Because it really is just, as soon as you put something into any of the AI models, if you're using the public services, right, you're pretty much giving that data off to them to use as they see fit, because that's their business model. And so having these enterprise agreements, and they're available, right? Cisco is certainly a large enough company, so we were able to kind of get them fairly quickly and work with companies and probably, frankly, work with the AI providers to figure out like what these agreements needed to look like. But now that that work's been done, most organizations should be able to go to all the AI providers and say, hey, we want an enterprise grade AI access. We want to make sure our data stays on our own. I can't remember what it is because I was just reading a post from OpenAI because of some of the stuff that they were posting, but there's like terminology about this idea where like your enterprise data is yours. It's not used as part of training. None of it's maintained. Like those things exist now. So I encourage everybody that's out there, if you want to use this and support your company and help them use AI responsibly, is let them know these things are available. Work with the providers, select the ones that are out there and open up the access. Because one thing we've seen, the shadow IT was a thing ages ago, right? That was a big buzzword. Shadow AI is the next one. Organizations, if they're not allowing their employees to use AI through an approved mechanism, you know they're using it in an unapproved mechanism. And so it behooves every one of us, right, listening to this podcast, because I imagine all of you are like us. We're network engineers at organizations providing input and feedback and trying to help, is to do this in a secure way that can be trusted. So real big kudos to Cisco IT and the Cisco team for not sitting on their hands longer than they needed to put them out there, and to really kind of adopt it in a very positive fashion to say, no, we want to see what's possible. We want to empower our employees. And it really has made a huge difference for many of us.
I'd like to just add one thing to that is I'd like to learn with Cisco from a skills perspective, that every single piece, whether, Hank releases Joe or anybody on this organization, every single piece of AI that we put out there, there isn't a line where we mention responsible AI, be responsible with your data. We reinforce that in whether we're writing a piece of code to do something or not, or we're talking about it from a high level perspective. I think we've done a really good job as a learning group to educate our community to be responsible and make them understand the risk that comes with AI. So I think good job to all of us. So high fives.
That's actually a perfect segue, Kareem, to where I was thinking about taking this discussion next. You mentioned Learn with Cisco. We also talked about educating users. So, of course, the big question, what should folks be focusing on learning? And Joe, I'd love to get your perspective on this as well, particularly at the expert level. But maybe we do that a little bit. Maybe we kind of segment this topic kind of by experience level, knowledge level. We think of our learners as kind of the entry, associate level folks, then the professional level folks that have been in the industry for a few years and have some good experience, and then to the expert level folks, our CCIEs and our CCDE community. Let's guide them a little bit. Where should folks maybe kind of first coming into the field, just now entering this field? And maybe this is already being worked into our certifications, our entry and associate level certifications like CCNA. But what are the recommendations for folks that are just getting started learning network engineering, and now also like, oh my gosh, I also need to learn some AI skills on top of that? Where do they start?
You delved into their learning network engineering. My gut tells me that a lot of the new people coming to network engineering probably already have quite a bit of AI, at least experience in using it. Maybe a lot more than they have the network engineering skills. And so, yes, we've recognized that. In fact, our CCST certification, Cisco Certified Support Technician certifications, were really the first to have AI exposure and you think, wow, those are the really entry level certifications. Why there? Because the people in that community, the people coming into that from like the Network Academy programs, they're playing with AI more so than the older generation that have been in network engineering, that AI is new. I can't remember who was saying to me that you generally, the things you learn up until you're 30, you just start to incorporate them into your habits. They just become your regular tools. And then after that, it becomes a lot harder to incorporate these new things. So I think people are already at that junior level. They're coming in. They're like, I've played with ChatGPT. I've got some pretty cool use cases. My nephew, who knows nothing about coding, he's a dentist. He was trying to write a Python script with vibe coding and ChatGPT, and with no Python knowledge, no HTML knowledge, but something that would scrape web storefronts for available inventory of things. It was taking him a while, but he was making progress. So I think there's some experience there already. On the more mid-level into expert level, that's where people want to see they're already experienced. They already know what they know. How can they incorporate that and make use of it in ways that Hank talked about, like as a Google replacement or as an oversight or as something that can help you with documentation? And for learning about that, both of you talked about Cisco U. There are tutorials on Cisco U that take you from just the beginnings of things like prompt engineering all the way into leveraging more AI in your IT landscape. And then beyond that, we've run these learning paths and we've run these programs like Rev Up to Recert using these learning paths that kind of get more holistically into the AI landscape as it is or as it was a few weeks or months ago, and trying to put that in the perspective of a network engineer and give them the tools they need, like understanding AI responsibly, to prompt engineering, to how can they leverage it with things like network automation, and then getting into areas like how would you build infrastructure to support this, to do your own training of maybe your own models or support local inferencing of some of these open source models, as an example, with GPUs or an architecture of hosts with GPUs interconnected. So I think Cisco U, Kareem, and the advocates, you've done a great job with getting some of that tutorial content, and we've really been laser focused on bringing in labs, on bringing in other content that gives you a very holistic vision of not just AI and the LLM landscape as it is today, but how Cisco specifically plays in that with things like network infrastructure for AI.
Thank you, Joe. And what about for folks at more, say, the seasoned and experienced levels already today? The older folks, as you said, are professional level folks, right? The kind of the 5-7 years of experience already. And, the IE level folks, the DE level folks that are maybe a little bit more responsible for some of the big picture stuff. What should those folks be thinking about and focused on from a skill set development standpoint?
For me, I was a little AI hesitant. I'll speak for myself initially. It was a little bit because of the kind of the responsible push, but what Hank said was you do the responsible research and then you start to move quickly. You figure out what works, what doesn't, what to be aware of, and you start to move quickly. My encouragement to the seasoned network engineer crew is to start experimenting. Again, we've all said be careful with your data, but start experimenting. Do things like Google adjacent or Google replacement. Think of things like, I wanted to analyze some packet captures. Again, not anything that would be sensitive. Debug output, not anything that would be sensitive. Think tools, network modeling tools like Cisco Modeling Labs is a great way to build up a network of like kind of artificial data, but that it looks like real data, and then see what the AI can do with show command output from that, debug output from that, packet capture output from that, and get comfortable with its capabilities the way they are today, and do a little of your own research. You'll find things. If you look for network ops or AI ops and networking, you'll find things that others are doing, and just absorb that information and help your leadership then, once you absorb that information, help them navigate how to make the best use of AI for your organization. That's where you can help them. You can kind of break through the FUD for them, break through some of the noise, some of the hype, and set up realistic expectations, show them practical demos, explain to them where they can get the value out of AI. And that's what, as a technologist, as a leader, that's what they'll be looking to you to be able to do.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it any better. At an expert level, you're leading that technology for your organization. Your expertise is built on years and years of knowledge, and that will supersede the AI any day. You have the years, you have the technical knowledge, you have the critical thinking, you have the communication with your leaders. Take charge, build a sandbox, understand the output, and advise your execs on where to go from an organization, what's useful to you, and based on your knowledge and what you know from the industry. And I think that's super valuable at an expert level. And, I think Joe said it best. It's get CML going, test things out, see what the AI can do for you, and then expose that to your leaders.
Yeah, and I think the approach that Hank talked about a bit with the approach that Cisco has taken over the past, year, 2 years, a couple of years of the generative AI explosion is a really good use case and example and a model to follow as well, where we were cautious yet aggressive at the same time.
Trust but verify. Yeah, yeah. Cautious but aggressive. I like that.
Yeah, exactly. Because you want to be careful, yet we don't want to fall behind. We need to continue to evolve and push forward. Yep, exactly. And then we'll kind of wrap up. And I know it's a bit early to share too much details about how maybe the certification portfolio overall is evolving.
Nah, not at all. We're pushing AI into all relevant certs, and we're not AI washing. It's truly where it's relevant. We just redid our DevNet certs as automation. Kareem, Hank, and I were all three in those workshops with others. It's not just a Joe, Kareem, Hank certification, but we folded in areas where AI is relevant in the automation game, especially with things like model context protocol. You look at the CCNA certification blueprint, it has elements of AI in there. Obviously, CCDE with the network infrastructure around AI, there's a whole area of expertise, a whole scenario around AI infrastructure in that. And so you're seeing that already. We're not necessarily testing on all of these. The new automation certifications will start being tested early next calendar year, but we are putting it out there. And again, it's not AI washing.
When Joe mentions AI washing, he's pointing to a common industry problem: adding AI labels to products, services, or even training programs without any real practical integration, more marketing than substance. At Cisco, the emphasis is on avoiding that. Instead of sprinkling AI buzzwords, they're deliberately building AI where it actually supports network automation, programmability, and infrastructure skills. To help you explore this further, we'll post resources in the description of this episode that outline exactly how AI is being integrated into the Cisco certification portfolio. You'll see how AI fits into certifications like CCNA, DevNet, and CCDE, where it's relevant to real-world jobs and where it prepares engineers for the future of networking.
We do feel, the three of us, as we also do network automation, we feel that what we're putting in these is very practical with what job roles are being expected of network automation engineers and network engineers in general.
I love that you specifically said not AI washing, because I think that also speaks to, some of the hesitancies or reservations or concerns that you see across the landscape on social media and et cetera, right? That everybody's doing their AI, everyone's doing AI. I love that you specifically said within our learning and certifications, we are not AI washing. We are implementing practical skills and tools. Yep. Well, thank you all so very much. I think this really helps to really start to address some of the real common questions that we're seeing from the community, the common concerns. I also hope that this is just a continuation of the conversation and the discussion with the community. As we mentioned, there's so much more we could have delved into in this single episode alone, security, etc. But any parting kind of thoughts, words of wisdom that you want to leave the community with before we wrap up?
I want to just say it's always refreshing to get with Joe and Hank and have these conversations. I feel like we're just hanging out and having a conversation, not really recording a podcast. But for those who are listening, our listeners, maybe tell us, what do you want us to cover from an AI perspective? What is it that you're seeing? What questions you may have? Give us some ideas on what you're looking for, because we're here to help. We're in a learning group, and we are all about the community and growing the community and the skill set. So just provide that for us.
You always do a great job calling back an open-ended question to the community, Kareem. I appreciate that you want to continue to hear their feedback and what more they're looking for. Joe?
Yeah, get active. You're listening to this, it's kind of a passive thing. It's good, but ask yourself, what are you going to do? What is the one thing you're going to take away from this and go do? Maybe it's to understand how to better incorporate or to incorporate AI a little bit more in your organization. Maybe it's to download LM Studio and play with it on a machine with a GPU in it and see kind of what is the realm of the possible with some of your use cases. Maybe it's to do some CML/LLM experimentation. What is that one thing that you're going to take away and do so that you set yourself on an active path to incorporate AI? Because even if you think, oh, it's another fad, it's another thing that will go away, it's going to be here for a while. And it makes you relevant right now with what everyone or the majority of the industry is talking about. And let's face it, we're here to learn. As network engineers, as scientists, as people in technology, we should always be about continual learning. And this is just one more thing we can add to our tool belt, one more cool horizon we can tackle and something else we can learn. So get out there, get active. Like Kareem said, if there's something else you want to hear from us or how you're using it, let us know. But what is that one thing you're going to do with what you learned today?
I really love that as a final thought, Joe, because that really actually takes us back to the original question of this episode is what should folks be looking to do? So, and to Kareem's point, keeping this conversation open and ongoing with the community is, I hope we start to hear more of these use cases being shared within the community so we can all expand and collaborate and, deepen our knowledge and our understanding and our usage of these tools. So thank you all very much.
And that concludes part 2 of this episode of the Cisco Learning Network podcast. Over the course of both parts, we've heard from Joe Clark, Kareem Iskander, and Hank Preston about how AI is reshaping the networking landscape, from the first steps of defining and applying it to the deeper questions of trust, responsibility, and skill development. This conversation is far from over. We encourage you to continue engaging with the community by joining the Cisco Learning Network, where you can share your own perspectives, explore additional resources, and connect with other learners and professionals navigating the same changes. And if you're ready to take your AI skills even further, check out Cisco U, where you'll find hands-on learning paths, courses, and resources to help you grow your expertise in AI and networking. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the Cisco Learning Network podcast on your favorite platform so you don't miss future episodes. And be sure to check out the Cisco Learning Network at learningnetwork.cisco.com to keep the conversation going, access exclusive learning content, and take the next step in your journey as a network professional. Thanks so much for listening.